Richie Stakelum, it's what now at this stage? 1986. We're talking 33 years since Borris-Ileigh won a county title.
Yeah.
You were on that team. Can you just tell us what it was like to be a Borris-Ileigh hurler back then?
Well, if we deal, Shane, I suppose, with the year itself, because there's lots of things that happened before that and after that, but I think if we deal with the year itself, it's probably a very good place to start. And I remember that particular year, Kiladangan were the Kingpins. I mean, they'd won the All-Ireland Cup final the previous year. They had been kind of Borris' nemesis for a few years before that. And they absolutely destroyed us in the semi-final of the North Championship that year. I mean, it was an embarrassment now. We got completely destroyed. And it was men against boys, so we were just humiliated. Now, by just a kind of a number of circumstances, we found ourselves in a situation whereby we got back into the championship because of the North Tipperary League that year. And actually, we didn't even win the North Tip League that year, but because Kiladangan had won it, I think, then they couldn't use that, I suppose, to further themselves in the championship, so we were going to get back again. So something happened then on the following Tuesday, Wednesday night, we went to the park, and Paddy Doyle was there. So Paddy Doyle from the Sarsfields. I mean, you know, and Borris had always a bit of a name, I suppose, of being a difficult crowd to handle.
Why so?
You know, there was a fond of liquor, a fond of dogs, and a fond of lots of other things as well, that sometimes they needed an outside person to put them together.
Not too much has changed, though.
No, it's still the same, I suppose. You know, that's the romance about Borris. But anyway, Paddy Doyle was there. And I remember he kind of brought us all together and around him, and he's more or less said, you were a crowd of underachievers. And he didn't mince his words and says, you know, it's all very well, we can kind of retire as underachievers. But at the time as well, I'd say, Shane, there was a few of the kind of really serious guys and senior guys like Dwyer, Nick Cohn, Timmy Delaney, Timmy Ryan of Lee, kind of coming to a stage in their careers to say, right, are we going to get any more of this now?
Because they'd won it in 81 and 83.
They already won two, but it would be kind of really accepted that Borris were underachieving for the amount of talent that was there. So Paddy Doyle didn't put it in tooth and nail. He said, look, it's, you know, you have kind of two choices here. You either just continue to do what you're doing or something has to change drastically. I remember there a kind of funny incident, and it was a classical Kenny moment. Brendan Kenny decided to start crying.
Crying?
Crying, yeah, because he was so humiliated over what had happened the previous week. And
his own performance now?
Oh, no, Brendan had kind of got into semi-retirement.
Okay.
Again, wouldn't have been unusual for Brendan now, you know. But Brendan decided anyway that this wasn't going to happen anyway, so he was going to put a huge effort in, and he was crying and says that he was humiliated and because this was never going to happen to a Borris team again. So it had a desired effect and fair play to Kenny, but I suppose it put a certain element that we were going to get serious about this. So Paddy Doyle, I think, was the X factor at the time, and I think the next match of any real significance was we played Tumivara, who were our old adversaries for years as well, and they had been beaten in an North final, so we were playing them for the right to get into the county series proper.
So both of you had been beaten by Kiladangan?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they were beaten by Kiladangan, but anyway, they were on the way up now. They were starting, it was the start of their team starting to come. And we beat him fairly comfortably over in Roscrea. But actually, an instant before that match was quite interesting. Again, kind of a Borris team. You know, there was we had a couple of guys who liked the bright lights in the night time, and there's a very strong rumour that one or two of the lads actually were in a famous den of iniquity called Henry Afrikas and Nina the night before. And one rumour has it anyway that one of them actually scored 12 points that day, and was supposedly actually drank one more the night before. So some things may not have changed, but anyway, you know, Borris won, Borris prevailed and went on. And that kind of kick-started us, and I think then we may have played, I think it was Carrick Swans in Borland and won that, and then we got to a county semi-final against Holy Cross in Templemore, and we had a really good performance that evening. And I think that was the evening we kind of realised, you know, we have a right chance here now. So then we're now in the county final, we're against Kiladangan. So kind of all roads lead to Thurles. And what I remember about that year was 86 was a really, really wet summer. There was a lot of harvest lost. And then late September turned out to be fantastic weather. And the day of the county final was just fantastic. So the lead up to the county final in Borris was just brilliant. I mean, you had the great Ned Harty was in his absolute pomp. And you know, there was Penny Dolan had this the Bantamcock, and your father was going around like the live Michael, like Dulloch O'Dooling with his tape recorder. And
he did like the video camera.
He did like the video camera. He loved it. And actually, if I recall about that as well, there was I told you recently as well that he did a lovely piece about the village, where he went up there to Knockahorna and showed some clips about the village itself, and he's doing his own commentary. I remember seeing it years later, and you kind of realise, Jesus, you know, like it looks like a kind of small hamlet, and all the smoky chimneys and everything else. And he came down to the village, and he only had a couple of cars around the square. But it was huge excitement leading up to the county final. Like Borris were going to see if they overturned Kiladangan, who were the All-Ireland champions. And actually, we were really, really well prepared, and there was a sense that we were going to win. We had this kind of.
How did you prepare though? Did you do anything different?
Well, we didn't do anything different. Well, Penny Doyle had this thing about I'll tell you what. I was in Dublin at the time teaching, and Francis Collins was with me as well, and we came up and down on the train a few occasions to train, and we actually trained in the afternoons, which at that time was unusual, taking time off work to come down to train on a Tuesday afternoon because the light was almost gone.
Right.
And
so everyone had to rearrange their work schedule.
Rearrange their work schedule. I remember there was one of the training sessions down in the park, and it was getting dark at night, and one of the youngest of the Ryans, Johnny, Doggy as they called him, was a typical Ryan, a great determination and great speed, and we're doing a sprint exercise across the pitch. And the lights, we had no lights of course, so very poor lights, the lights of cars on it, and Johnny ran straight into the wall. He just crashed into the wall. No, he was none the worse for it, but he could have been killed like, but he was given it the full pelt, you know. But in the lead up to then, there was we used to have these meetings up in the Marion Hall, right? And on the Saturday night after mass, everybody would go up, and like it was kind of free for all, you know. It wasn't just reserved to the players. It was reserved to the players and anybody else who thought that they had a right to be there. People like me, Collins would come in, and my father might come in and sit at the back of the hall.
Some older gents at the time.
Absolutely, yeah. I suppose
they're entitled to be there.
Well,
in their opinion,
they were entitled to be there. And then Penny Doyle would painstakingly go through the opposition. I mean, player by player, and what we were going to do, and what we weren't going to do. It was the level of detail was just.
This is a free for all in front of anyone who wanted to talk about it.
Well,
this
you know what I mean. I mean, in Borris, of course, not everybody would be let into the room, because if you tried to get in and you were deemed not to be appropriate, then you were probably just.
If you weren't of sufficient hurling stock.
Correct.
Yeah, because there'd be a bit of snobbery there.
People kind of knew that anyway, who'd be there. Anyway, so Penny Doyle would go through the routine, and he'd go through this fella's weakness and that fella's weakness and how you're going to combat him, and he'd go literally from 1 to 15 and more.
Of a team who hammered you.
Of a team who hammered us, yeah. And of course then, you know, Dwyer would have to have his say.
That's Noel O'Dwyer from people outside the parish.
Yeah.
Describe him now.
Yeah. Noel O'Dwyer, right? So Noel O'Dwyer was a larger than life character, but in fairness was, he was at the epicentre of everything that we did, and he was the king, right? And, you know, you didn't have to tell Noel he was a king, he just assumed the royalty, but he was a phenomenal player. And he was at the stage, he was coming to the very end of his career, and Dwyer probably recognised himself to say, look, you know what, I need to max out now the last couple of years here, and by crikes, did he max out. So when Dwyer started to speak, everybody had a tendency to listen, and you know, it was usually a fair degree of fire and brimstone.
Right.
But he was again convinced as well that this had to be done, and that we were going to win. And Timmy Delaney, of course, would be a much more eloquent version. Again, would give his spiff. So there's a couple of the senior gentlemen.
And the match programme actually tells you their ages. Noel O'Dwyer was 37.
Yeah, they were.
Timmy Delaney 36. Yeah.
They were, yeah. So of that vintage. And they were only in their prime, of course, at that stage. But,
We're getting going.
So these are the fellas who would do most of the talking. And of course there was tea and sandwiches and everything else, and then you'd adjourn home. So it was a plan that Penny Doyle had for that county final, which was very unusual at its time. Kiladangan had a very strong, sturdy set of backs, and they decided that Penny Doyle decided that he would put Philip Kenny full forward. Now, I don't think Philip played any of the matches full forward, but it was a plan. And the idea was that Dinyamara was, the strong, steady, solid full back. And the idea was to try and bring Dinyamara out of his comfort zone and bring him out the field, and Philip won. Philip had great legs.
Don't play him at his own game,
Don't
basically.
play his own game, correct, yeah. And in fairness, because the previous couple of years, Dinny Mara was king of all his surveying there because he was man-on-man stuff. But Philip wasn't playing man-on-man, so Philip kind of went out around the half-forward and out around midfield. And that's a huge difference now. I mean, that may seem to people today, that kind of stuff happens all the time. But that was unheard of. And Preceded stuck to his guns, and Philip duly came off the field and ran. And I scored 6 points from play. And if you go back and look at matches at the time, 6 points from play any day is a huge haul. But in a 14-7 win, sure, I mean, it was the majority of the scores. So that was the main difference why we won the match. But, you know,
going into the game, what was the pressure like on the final day itself? Was it different than other days?
It was, yeah. I mean, there's huge excitement around Borris between flags and everything else. And, you know, Borris, and I mean, this team effectively had won 2 county finals. But there was there was kind of 3 generations in that team. You had what I would call the Dwyer, Nola Dwyer, Timmy Delaney, Timmy Ryan of Ileigh, Nolan Marr. Right, let's call it, you know, of that generation.
The veterans.
Then you had the likes of Big Timmy Stapleton, fullback. You had Jerry Stapleton and Florrie Ryan were around that era, right? And then the next group you had maybe a third or kind of 3A group was Bobby and Michael Ryan and Palace. And then you had a younger brigade, which would have been myself and Aidan, John McGrath, Francis Collins, and my brother Connor. That would have been that group. So this was the kind of gelling of this team, and so there was a real air of expectation because, you know, after the debacle against Kiladangan the first day, the team had definitely steadily improved, and we had fierce confidence that we were going to win the match. You know, and I would say going out in that county final was one of the only days, I think, when I heard the Borris that I actually felt that we were absolutely going to win.
Yeah.
There was that sense that we were going to win because we had prepared unbelievably well. There was a great faith in what Kiladangan was doing because what he had done was he had transformed us, and of course we were coming in as massive underdogs. And
was it the usual pageantry of the, you know, Borris-Ileigh have the bantam cock on the crest, and they strode out like bantam cocks, that whole legend.
There was all that.
And the cock was released out into the field.
And to be fair, I suppose, you know, there was a big crowd that day, and it was a beautiful day, and you got a sense very quickly from the crowd that there was they wanted a sense for Borris to win. I mean, it was the underdog, and there's a certain kind of romanticism about the underdog and about Borris and that. And we started off very well, and I think maybe from a long way out, maybe with about 15 minutes to go, we had a fair chance. It looks like the Borris were going to pull this off, you know, because Kiladangan just weren't able to impose themselves in the game, and there was great satisfaction, particularly coming into the last 2 or 3 minutes. When you're in the last 2 or 3 minutes of a county final, and you know you have the match won. Like there's nothing like a feeling like that.
Well, the word is that Borris got a free towards the end, and you had the fist up in the air and you were giving it lots to the crowd. Is that right?
It was very simple, Shane, because the referee says this is the last puck of the game. You're 7 points up, and you know Kiladangan have hammered you out the gate, and you're beating the All-Ireland club champions. And someone has just told you this is the last puck of the game. It was kind of an easy thing to do. The stupid thing I did was I shouldn't have pucked away the ball at all. I should have pucked the ball to myself and kept it.
Yeah.
Like an idiot, I pucked it up the field.
Well, you kept another ball that you have there.
I did, yeah, I did. This is one then that came after that. This is a ball that I actually have here. As you said, I didn't realise that it's had for so long. I got that. That was the ball the day of the Munster Club final when we beat Clarecastle in Limerick. So I actually had that ball just as the game was being finished. So that's a nice little.
Yeah, a little habit of having the ball at the very end.
Yeah.
Not a bad little habit to have.
No.
So what was it like afterwards?
Oh, the exhilaration when we won the county final was probably the best feeling I ever had in sport. I think.
No, and that's taken into account a year later. The famine is over, winning Munster title.
That was very different. I mean, that was I suppose in a much more overt way. This was your own parish.
More intimate.
And this was, I'd say, probably if you talk to Borris people, Shane, that was probably the day that gave most Borris people the most satisfaction.
Why do you say that?
Because you've beaten the All-Ireland Club the All-Ireland Club champions, again, who had just ruled the roost. And I mean, to beat the All-Ireland Club champions is no mean feat, and they were a phenomenal, they were a fantastic team. Like, they were a really, really good team, and they had prevailed, I mean, big time in Tipperary for the previous couple of years, and they really, behaved like the Kingpins, and they were a fantastic team. They were a team that Kiladangan got the absolute max out of themselves. We're talking about a team, getting the last piece out of the juice of the onion. They got everything out of themselves. And they were a really, really rugged team by crikes. I tell you, when you played against Kiladangan, you know all about it.
And when you look,
ferociously physical team.
And when you look at the match programme there and you see the names on their team, like Eamon O'Shea is the one that would stand out to people even in this generation because of his involvement with Tip.
Yeah.
What do you see when you look at that?
Well, when I see that, I see the half back line. I see Gilly Williams, I see Breeze Mara and Michael Hogan. I mean, they were a really, really good group of players. I mean, Sharky Gibson was as tough as nails. Tony Shepherd was a fantastic goalkeeper. Enda Hogan midfield, I'll come back to that, there's a funny story with that in a second. Then you go to the Williamses. I mean, Jim Williams and Jerry Williams and Paddy Williams, the Bowler Williams up front, these were really seriously tough men. I'd say one of the hardest men that I ever hurled against was Jim Williams.
Yeah?
Jim was as tough as nails now. A really, really tough man. I tell you, Jerry himself had some battles. Like, the splinters were flying in those days, I tell you. And Big Timmy inside and Paddy Williams, I tell you, you wouldn't put a Rottweiler in there, but it was savage stuff. I mean, it was no place for the faint-hearted now, I'll tell you.
And like you mentioned, the situation with Dinny O'Mara being a brilliant full-back, and apparently what I've heard is that the talk afterwards was about the disagreement between himself and John Cahill over who would mark Philly Kenny.
Yeah, well, I'm not surprised, because I say that the pretty sense was that John Cahill was a younger guy. Dinny O'Mara was around for a while, and John Cahill probably would have been better suited to come out the field after Philip. I don't really recall an awful lot about that. I suppose at the time it was so unusual to say, like, if I go out, will I expose you? Will somebody else take care of him out the field? And by the time that's all sorted and done, it's almost too late. But Philip just literally had great speed and had a great movement from left to right with his feet, and he got some great points. And that was the killer. I mean, they just didn't come to terms with that. But there is one funny incident I want to tell you about. And you see Enda Hogan there, you have number 9. Like, Enda is actually, if I'm not mistaken, a cousin of the McCormicks, Drumtarsla.
Right, that's in Dan McCormick.
Yeah, he's a cousin
them.
of John and Mary, John was their father. I'm pretty certain of that. Now, Enda Hogan had won an All-Ireland minor medal with Jerry Stapleton in '76 as a cornerback, right? Now, I suppose in the modern day, Enda be known as an enforcer.
Right, okay.
So you can take what you with that now, Shane.
It's fairly obvious.
He was a strong, tough guy, right? And the hair, Timmy Ryan of ID, was marking him. And there's an incident in the game, and your father was refereeing it, was not refereeing the match. Your father was commentating on the match. And the camera picks it up very clearly. There's, let's call it an incident in the middle of the field, right in front of the referee. And Timmy turns around, and whatever went on anyway, he absolutely melted Enda Hogan right across the back of the hurley. And like, nowadays, you'd be getting a car of a certain hue, and you mightn't see the pitch again for a while, and if Joe Bradley and these boys had it in the box, it'd be very easy to circle it. But Timmy got away with it. And maybe it was because it was a case of, the biggest gun in town, and maybe, as your father said in the commentary, sure, he had a commentary. But he got away with it. He got away with it, yeah.
And what about that Borris-Ileigh team? When you look at that,
I kind of don't need my glasses to see that one. Sure, I mean, Jerry Stapleton was as good as centre back. I think that he was the best centre back, that I played with. I mean, he was a fantastic player. He had brilliant hands. And the thing with Jerry is, Jerry had a great positional sense, and he was totally selfless. Jerry was a totally selfless player. Jerry would always give the ball to a fella in a better position. And there was numerous times when I stood outside Jerry and I called for it, and not only would you get it, you'd get it in a position to be straight into your hand. Like, he was a brilliant player. So you have Bobby then, I mean, just fire and brimstone, and then you've got Noel Dwyer. I mean, Noel Dwyer just had 37. I think as the year went on in that year, Noel Dwyer got better and better. He was the man of the match in the Munster Club final. We beat Clarecastle, and I would be very great friends with Daly Anthony over the years. He was only a young fellow as a sub, but he said the big thing they had said before the game was don't foul because Noel Dwyer would kill us with frees, and they truly did foul. And I think Noel scored about 9 points from frees that day, 9 out of 9.
Especially in winter hurling, that's going to be a killer.
But and then inside you had one of my favourites, and a man I absolutely loved was Mick Cohen. And Mick Cohen, kind of looked after my brother Connor, looked after the younger lads. but Cohen was just a very savvy player.
You have a picture of him there, don't you?
Yeah. I love Cohen. I bring this with me. This is in my car. I have this everywhere I go. And he was a special character. And I think, if you're talking about if Cohen could play anyway, if you wanted to play at nice hurling, he'd play nice hurling. But I tell you, if you wanted to get rough and salty, then you picked in the wrong guy. You come out the wrong end of it.
I might just put it up towards the camera there.
Yeah.
So that's Mick Cohen.
Yeah.
Passed away.
And I think, sadly, if I'm not mistaken, Shane, I think Mick Cohen is probably the only member of that squad that year, I think, who was passed away. And I think the last time I saw Mick, one of the last times I saw Mick was, there was one of these 25-year reunions for that team. When they take you into Thurles into the Ileigh County final with Drummond Inch, I think, and Thurles starts was the day James Woodlock got a really bad leg injury.
2010.
2010.
Or was it 2009 actually?
Yeah, whatever it was.
Yeah.
And Mick was there on the pitch with us that day, and he was in absolute sheer agony, but you never knew it. And we went back to Borris at night to have a good few pints as usual, and remember he was upstairs in the bed, and Noel Dwyer, who was really great to make him great friends, was telling us he was upstairs, he was in agony, but he wouldn't have missed the day for anything. But he was a fantastic guy. Yeah.
And so you obviously had the journey on from there all the way to the club final. But how do you, I'm assuming the town went absolutely insane, that there was a trailer out.
Oh yeah, the town did the usual. The town went insane. Bonfires in Terry's Bridge. And the funny thing is, we went, where did we go? I went up the street to meet a couple of, I have a whole lot of friends who come down from college for the weekend. I actually got back to work on the Tuesday. They didn't get back to work until Thursday. Right, that'll tell you how mad it was. And they were in Borris all that time. But we ate, I think, in the Rag. And
this is after the game.
After the game. And I remember meeting my mother there. And my mother would never go to games. So she was delighted. And she would always be in the church praying. But we went to the Rag, and then we came from, as Michael Delaney saying, cavalcade. We came from the Rag. So we had to assemble at Delaney's, which was just over the bridge from where, right? And I think either our lorry, or as it could have been one of Gleason's lorries, probably was commissioned to bring us up to.
That's the local drinks company for anyone who doesn't know.
Yeah, M&J Gleason, sponsored by M&J Gleason, the bag here, an heirloom from '91. But anyway, and Michael Delaney decided that he would be the MC. So as we come up from Delaney's, up along by Terry's Bridge, and as we come up towards Borris, Michael Delaney is doing a running commentary on all of the people that he sees along the way. And I remember we get by Bishop Quinlan Park, and he does a bit of a eulogy about Bishop Quinlan and the long walk, and then we come up into the square, and of course the place is mental, but then we have to go up to St. Bridget's, the cemetery. And we had to pull outside the cemetery, and Mickey Delaney then does another eulogy about all these great hurlers that were inside, would love to be out here with us tonight. So you had all that pageantry going on. And of course you eventually, you do all of the streets, and of course the horns are blaring, and the people are out of all the houses, and just mayhem. And then of course back into the square, and another I think Timmy Delaney had to sing Lovely Fair Ileigh, which had to be done.
Yeah, of course.
And then of course we adjourned to all the well-known establishments in the middle of the town, north of the town, and west of the town. And I think actually the final place was up where your grandfather came from.
2 miles out the road.
To the Castle Palace.
Yeah. You got well refreshed out there.
Well refreshed now. Not that we didn't need too much more refreshment after that now, but so it was a typical Borris, and of course the next day was better.
Yeah, oh no doubt.
Yeah.
Actually, the dressing room straight after you won the county title, do you have any recollection of that?
Yeah, I remember with my brother Connor, because obviously he was the youngest baby of the team. A special moment with him. My cousins, I suppose, Francis Collins, who was kind of a heartbeat of that team, was a terrier, and him and myself would have been in college in Dublin. Francis was in Trinity, but we would have got on great, and we'd have been great friends for years, and it was a huge one for him. So there was a couple of special moments with the lads that you kind of had grown up with, Shane, the lads of that young age group. And then, of course, you had Dwyer, who was just like regal. This is kind of what I'm supposed to be doing here.
To the manner born.
Give himself about a half an hour washing himself before he'd present himself to the outside masses,
Right.
But it was great. That was great. And, of course, the thing about the dressing rooms in Thurles is, and of course your father is still going around with his microphone.
Yeah.
And I think one of ye, maybe your oldest brother, and maybe Paddy was with him, going around with him, but he was in tow everywhere. And the dressing rooms in Thurles at that stage were big concrete bowls under the stand. Sure, half Borris was in there, you know. So it's great. It's great, yeah.
Yeah, because the stories that I hear was that my father, the Saint, would have been making hurleys at the time,
Yeah.
and half the team would have been in and around the house all the time.
Yeah.
And there's one story, myself and my older brother Tim could have taken or leave it at the time, but the young Paddy, who's on the senior team at the moment, that he was infatuated that you gave him £1.
Wow.
And he wouldn't spend £1 because you'd given it to him and he didn't want to get rid of it. I don't know if you remember that.
Can I have it back, Paddy?
Yeah. And what sort of hurleys were thrown out to you?
Well, your father made my hurleys for that year, you know, I think that's we got great. I had great hurleys. I mean, sure, the Saint looked after me very, very well. You know, there was no problems down to Chapel Street and down into there's a whole scatty around the kitchen, but was out then to get the hurleys.
Yeah. In great hands, great hands. What do you remember the All-Ireland semi-final?
Oh, the All-Ireland semi-final. The All-Ireland semi-final we played against Ballycastle, right? And it was a fairly rugged affair now. I mean, they came with fire and brimstone. Yeah,
the Antrim.
Yeah, it was a rough match because I remember at half time in the dressing room, and like my brother Conor was getting a couple of stitches over there, and somebody else was getting a few stitches there, and Brendan Kenny actually had broken his ankle.
Any more tears this time?
Brendan Kenny went to hit some fella a belt of his shoulder, or some fella hit him a belt of his shoulder and did him, but Brendan broke his ankle, so he was gone. So I can still remember Dwyer inside in full pomp inside and kind of giving a dose to say, are we going to let this crowd come down and do this to us? Because they were roughing us up now. And, you know, they were giving it to us fairly hot.
Where was this game on?
In the stadium in Thurles.
Oh, it was in Thurles, yeah.
And of course, you know, word had it, of course, that somebody in the rag had given Ballycastle a whole lot of the Borris videos, and of course this particularly riled Dwyer that even our neighbours were against us, right? Yeah. So all kind of ammunition was being used to stoke us up. But anyway, Flory Ryan, Pat Ryan, Bobby's brother, who had been in London at the time, but had actually come back and he was on the panel and he started to train with us again. And he had been, you know, involved in some of those early in the 81, in particular in the 83, but he had drifted away, but he was back, and of course all of these guys come back to Borris. And with Brendan Kenny going off, Dwyer kind of shouts over and says, "Flowery, you're going in." I can distinctly see Flowery sitting in the corner, kind of looking at this, and looking at it a certain amount, and saying, "Jesus, like, what have I let myself in for? Is this what the return is like?" But we won fairly convincingly in the end, but it was a fairly bruising affair now, you know. And then it was kind of all roads to Croke Park.
Well, the story I heard is it was impossible to try and find a babysitter. And there was, it was at the time because everyone was heading up the country. Like my mother had to give, I think Paddy was too young to go up, so send him out to her sister out 20 miles out the road. And the other joke going around was that, you know, people would be worried about their house getting robbed because there was no one in the town to mind any of the houses.
But what I remember about the preparation for that was my brother Pat, I think, was the secretary or treasurer or whatever, one of the general haberdashery guys in the club, and he decided that they were going to charter a train.
Right. From Thurles, Templemore?
From Thurles and Templemore. You would get Thurles and Templemore. And I said, "Stack, what are you doing? Stack, you're chartering a train." But I think because he's also a fairly logical guy, when he kind of explained the logic to people, he said, "Hold on now, there's nobody having to drive cars to Dublin. We can all go up together. We can all come home together. We'll all arrive into the city together, and it should be a great day. We may never do it again." So the train was chartered, and then masses were moved early for the previous evening so everybody could be accommodated. And the whole of Borris arrived into Thurles station to get in the train to go to Dublin. Either Thurles and I can't remember the Thurles and Templemore. I think it was Thurles. So the whole village got on the one train. So there's nothing is segregating people on the way up now. Yeah. So the whole of Borris were in 3 or 4 or 5 carriages going to Dublin.
Sure, it must have been heaving.
It was fantastic.
Because it would have been a celebratory atmosphere even on the way up.
Yeah, there was indeed a celebratory atmosphere on the way up. And we went, we went to the Skyline up on the north side. I think we even could have gone down to St. Pat's College.
There's no past Drumcondra.
Yeah, just a bit of a walk around there, and then down to Croke Park. And actually, I think that was one of the first years that the club finals were played on St. Patrick's Day. Right?
And within that, would this have been all the players' first time playing at Croke Park? Because Tipperary had the 18-year famine.
That's a great point. I'd say Nolan Dwyer had definitely played there. Flory Ryan had played it. Well, Flory was a sub. Jerry Stapleton had played it because he won a minor in 76.
Oh, okay.
Philip had won a minor in 80 or 81. Timmy Delaney might have played there. I had played there with the colleges in Dublin. but only once. So yeah, you're right. The vast majority of fellas had never played it before.
Whereas probably a few of the Ratnure ones
Well,
played
all
the
the
Leinster
Ratnure
champion.
lads, they had all played
Or
there
yes,
several
from the
times.
club, yeah.
Now the other thing about that Shane is very interesting was it was the first year and the only year that the football was played before the hurling. So Finbar's played Kiladangan of Roscommon before us. So football before hurling on an old style pitch. So it was in fairly reg order
by the time you got to it.
We got on it, right? And I think actually it was Ratnure's 4th All-Ireland Club final.
Yeah, because Borris-Ileigh are the only Wexford team that actually did win one, and that was in '89.
Correct.
So Wexford teams were probably, not in a smart way, but used to losing All Irelands.
Correct.
So you probably would have went up with the mentality we're going to win it, eh?
Yeah, I think actually Borris-Ileigh were actually beaten by Kiladangan the previous year. I think they were. But anyway, this was Ratnure's 4th, right? And ultimately they lost was their 4th to lose. But again, we were really, really, really confident going into that match. They had a couple of great players. I mean, Jimmy Hoolan was centre forward at the time and he'd been shooting all around. They had John Conran, they had the Quigleys, they had the Morrises, so as I said, they've been around a while now. And a very strong, fierce, powerful physical team. I remember a funny incident before that game. My brother Connor, who would not be known in our family for being the most organised when it came to his gear. Now, I was anal about all that stuff. I mean, my laces were nearly shaken with iron, right? So I had everything organised maybe days before that. Connor was a complete lastminute.com merchant, right? So in the dressing room before the match, and those dressing rooms were in the corner of the old Cusick stand, Connor comes into me and he says, Dickie, he says, have you laces? I said, you're joking me. Laces? All-Ireland final, you've no laces. No, shh. The wire here is I have no laces, he says, there'll be trouble. I says, show me the boots. Do you want to see the cut of the boots? Like, the boots were wet and damp, they're like something out of the bog. And I said, well, I have my shoelaces. So Conor Stapleton played in the All-Ireland Club final with shoelaces in football boots. I mean, it was just, like, talk about the difference of approach.
Well,
right? Anyway.
I can't criticise him, I forgot my boots for a Club All-Ireland.
Anyway, you must be like Conor, but anyway. So, Aidan Ryan got a goal very early on in that match, which was really important. And there was an incident in that game, just, I'd say about 2 minutes into the game, a ball broke under the Hogan stand and Timmy Stapleton came out. And there was man ball and all, there was timber, absolutely splinters of timber. Like, I think it was, could have been one of the, Mark Morrissey was full forward. And Jesus, it was an unmerciful pull at Timmy's anyway. But anyway, he won the ball. But so we won the match. We won the match, I think, fairly convincingly for a finish. And I remember the last play of that game. Noel Dwyer and Cohn were involved. And there was Noel Dwyer struck the ball and wound up the field and the whistle was blown. And Noel Dwyer threw the hurley up in the air, like in a ferocious show of emotion. Like, Dwyer was usually fairly circumspect, and a very emotional guy when needed be, and very, very forceful. But there was a ferocious outburst of emotion from Noel, which you didn't normally associate with. The hurley went up in the air like tossing the caber, and the first person he embraced was Cohn. So obviously there was a very strong bond there, and it was a really, really powerful emotional bond, because probably reckoned, I won't get another chance of this.
Yeah.
They're the kind of the things I remember most about the day. And I remember then coming back to Borris that night, and it was really freezing cold. There was snow and everything on the road, and there was the most spectacular, beautiful moment of that whole time was we went back and we had food in the Clarence Hotel, the one that Bono and these guys own now, right? And again, all of Borris is in, right? There's supposed to be a meal for the team, but at this stage, should Jesus they have to come up.
Well, they're entitled to it.
So they're all in. There's everybody getting a bit of everything, and a few beers going. And the crack is fantastic. So now we're all heading back to the train station to get the train home. And this was the most magical half hour, I think, that Borris people ever saw. You come in, picture this now, you come into Houston Station, there's plenty of liquor on board, right? And on the same platform as we waited for the train to pull in was the Clonagale people are going back west.
Would have been disappointed yet again.
For the 6th time, the 6th All-Ireland final that they had lost. Borris had been in one, and had won one. And all that kind of esplanade in front of the train is now packed with Borris people and the Clonagale people. And the singing started. Next thing, Paddy Dolan is told to let up the cock. So Paddy Dolan is chaired up on the air, and cock-a-doodle-doo throws a cock up in the air, and there's an absolute roar, a guttural roar of Borris people that this is it now. This is your Paddy Dolan up on somebody's shoulders with the Borris cock in the air. The poor cock doesn't know what's going on, but there's roaring and bawling going on, and then Paddy Dolan is cheered the whole way into the train.
The ISPCA wouldn't be too happy these days.
The RSPCA or whatever, yeah. So then it was on the train and then back to Borris, and sure, the next few days in Borris were magic, so that was that kind of.
But you mentioned the kind of what happened with Noel O'Dwyer and Michael Cohen. What was going on in your head and heart when that's happening?
Sure, I mean, I remember I met my father on the field and an uncle of mine on the field.
Because everyone stormed on.
Everybody used to come onto the field, and you just knew just that this was really, really special. And that the chances of this ever happening again were probably nil. And at that young age, I recognised that at 23 years of age. I mean, this isn't going to happen again. Well, not going to happen to me, and highly unlikely. Because generally speaking, teams get one chance at this. So it was hugely emotional in that, you've been part of something really, really special. And when you think about the kind of journey from probably July of that year to the following March, that absolute desolation. Brendan Kenny putting on a bit of a show on the field.
Yeah.
To the All-Ireland Club final. I mean, it was an amazing journey.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah.
And when you think back on it now, is there, in the years since, does the bond stay there with you and the boys that did it?
It does. Now, I don't go down as often as I should. I suppose life gets in the way, you get distracted. But, I would still obviously be very keen to hear how Borris get on. Those days are very cherished days. I think that for Borris-Ileigh people who were around at the time, it was a once-in-a-lifetime experience. I think probably for a number of years after that, I think it has been a bit of a millstone around young lads in Borris' necks, about being compared to that Borris team, which is kind of futile because that's a different era. And I think that may have often weighed teams down on Borris to try to emulate those teams that be compared back, or kind of those.
Even the expectation, Borris can do it.
That era was unusual in that there was, as I said, there was 2 or 3 kind of generations came one after the other where the players kind of melded in together. Because when I look at Borris is unusual. I think it's only up until last year, Shane. That I think until last year, Borris had never won a Division 1 county juvenile title. Is that correct?
I think that might be
they won under 12 last year.
They've definitely been sparse. And
Fudge was young, but they save at the same.
The one that was all over the internet.
Yeah. Better than the Fudge, by the way.
Yeah.
But I think that that team was probably the only juvenile team that ever won an A county championship. Now, I could be wrong, but it just goes to show you at the time, you see, because the village is so small, you never have enough of players up to a certain age to be able to compete on a regular basis.
Yeah, all our teams were B all the way up. Yeah.
But on the way up, you see, you would have, because I remember maybe playing under 14 at 11. I remember Conor playing under 14 at 10 in the goals. But you might have had 7 or 8 that could compete with anybody. But then you had a whole lot of younger fellas, so you never really be able to just have the numbers. But that era, as I said to you, had probably 3, maybe 4 generations that actually came together at the time. And we're still within a time frame of 37 down to 19, and all in between, which was kind of quite special. And the unique thing about that is, I don't know, would you have that today? Because I don't think players stay going until 37 years of age.
Not many.
What age is Paddy?
He's 30, just turned 34.
34, so he would have been around the same age or so as probably Timmy Ryan of Ali at that stage.
And then you have lads who are 18.
Yeah, so we had none of that now. Conor was the youngest. Conor was 19, and the next youngest was Aidan. And Aidan would have been 20. 21, 22.
With the shock of blonde hair.
With the big shock of blonde hair, yeah. And then there was myself at 23 and 4, and Philip and John McGrath. And then you had Mick and Bobby. So yeah, you're right. So we had more fellas at the higher end, but only one guy at 19.
And now this year, 32 and a half years since the All-Ireland, 33 since the last North, beating Killer by a semi-final by a point on the way. Yeah. The pressure, no doubt, not necessarily the pressure on the players, but the talk is just everywhere. That's what it's all about.
That's. I mean, it's what Oscar Wilde said: is there anything worse than being talked about is not being talked about? I mean, the Borris wouldn't have it any other way. Jesus, that's the way it is. I mean, poor Ned Harty couldn't sleep for weeks. Poor Ned, he'd have to go down, he'd have to settle himself down, and he just wouldn't hardly be able to talk properly for a few weeks before and after. But that's it. I mean, players I'm sure wouldn't have it any other way. Sure, it doesn't keep rural Ireland and villages. Like, can you just imagine what living in Borris is like this week now? Just like, I'd love to be in Borris for this week. Like, rural Ireland gets enough thumping, and there's been enough things have happened, enough sad things have happened in Borris.
Especially in the last year or so, yeah.
And you know all about that. But I mean, a village like Borris deserves a respite. I mean, for this week and for next week, it'll be a magical place to be. And if they're to put it off on Sunday week, it'll be some place to be the following week as well.
Thanks very much, Sticky.
Yeah, you're welcome.